Good afternoon. It's officially afternoon here in Chicago on this, the 5th of November, 2021. Where does the time go? And welcome very much. Have all of you here at the First Friday Club of Chicago. We meet on the first Friday of the month, October through May, to make some connections between our faith, our work, and some of the key issues of the time and the day in which we live. And besides all of you who have signed on to the First Friday Club presentation today, I also want to welcome a whole group of fine young men who are the Leo Lions, the gentlemen who are part of Leo High School out here on 79th Street in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood of Chicago. Had a chance to have some pizza. I would call it a late breakfast. They called it lunch. And it was very good. And thank them all for being with us today, along with their principal, Shaka Rawls, who's one of our co-presenters today, and the other co-presenter, Heidi Stevens. A quick introduction about what we're going to do today. And the topic we're trying to focus on through the genius and the talent of Heidi and Shaka. We've titled it, A City Divided. What will it take for Chicago's communities to come together? That's no secret. And we are a city divided, and I've lived in it all my life, and I can attest to that very much. Shaka and Heidi, probably in chance, grace of God or whatever, connected about 5 years ago and put them on a shared path to better understand and to really proactively address topics of violence and disconnect among the various communities of Chicago. And based upon their time in conversation together, their shared wisdom and the experiences that are part of their lives, we're going to jump right into that. Heidi Stevens currently is the creative director of Parent Nation. It's a new initiative at the University of Chicago's TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health. And before we went on, I asked Heidi, tell me about what TMW is. And she said it's 30 million words, TMW. And Parent Nation works to build a society that ensures all parents have the information, the resources and the support they need to optimally raise their children. And considering what the head of McDonald's had to say this week, particularly about mothers, that is certainly a hot button issue in Chicago if you listen to anything on talk radio. Prior to joining Parent Nation, Heidi, as so many of us know and read, she worked at the Tribune for 23 years. She's too young to have done that, looking at her picture right here. 23 years is a lifetime, Heidi. And where she wrote a daily column she called Balancing Act. Heidi maintains to this day a nationally syndicated column, and once a week, and she lives up in the Logan Square community with her husband and her 2 kids. And Shaka Rawls, who was wearing the Leo Lion orange tie and the Leo Lion black shirt, as so many people are inside this wonderful building today. He's the principal of Leo High School, an all-male Roman Catholic school located on 79th Street, just west of Halsted. And Shaka, I remember as a very little boy, my mother pushing me down 79th Street to go shopping. There used to be a department store right on the other side of the street here. And I remember that vividly because I grew up over around 78th and Racine. Shaka worked in urban education before coming here in 2016. He was there for 18 years with more than 14 years in a classroom, but he also served as the community administrator in the Chicago Public Schools and is the founder of what is called IMPACT, IMPACT, Inspiring and Motivating Positive Actions for City Teens, a nonprofit organization dedicated to community engagement and mentoring city students. He's an alumnus of Leo, a native of Chicago, and he enjoys spending time with his wife and daughter to get free of all these men he's surrounded by every day of his work life.
Okay.
Go.
I didn't want to interrupt if you were still talking.
Oh, no,
Thank
no,
you
no.
so much for that lovely introduction. How are you, Shaka?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Heidi?
I'm good.
Good.
Why don't you start us off by talking about your journey to Leo, first as a high school student and then more recently as the principal?
So I'll give you the abbreviated version since you've heard this story a million times. I grew up in a small community, Woodlawn Gardens, which is just south of the Obamas, Hyde Park area. I went to Holy Cross Elementary School. My parents were very fortunate enough to send me to a Catholic elementary school. And me and my siblings, both Kiana, my brother and I, all attended Catholic schools. My brother actually preceded me here at Leo. He's a 1989 graduate, excuse me. After going to Holy Cross Elementary School, I matriculated to Leo High School. I was very fortunate to get here during a time where Leo was trying to find its identity. After the white flight from the early 70s and the mid 70s, we had pretty much turned from a predominantly white working class school to a predominantly African-American institution. And Leo was still trying to find its identity, but there was a ton of school pride. And the vibe that is Leo High School today existed in 1993. So I'm really very proud of that. After Leo, I graduated as a 3-sport athlete. I was a very average athlete on a very phenomenally athletically gifted team. So I didn't play a lot, but I played enough. I did get a small financial assistance in college. I went to Aurora University, played a little football. When I say little, I mean a very little football. I watched quite a few games, but with great seats from the sideline. So, but that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing at Aurora University is it taught me a sense of community and how to continue to build relationships and bonds that I carry to this day. In fact, one of my college friends has a student in my school to this day. After Aurora University, I went to work in East Aurora High School first, and then Chicago Public Schools, the charter system and the regular schools, finally ending at Burke Elementary School on 53rd and King Drive, where Leo kind of called me up and asked if I would be willing to come and take the helm of this institution. And in 2016, I resigned from Chicago Public Schools and became the very proud principal of Leo Catholic High School.
Did you have to give that decision a lot of thought? Did it feel like a list of pros and cons, or was it kind of a no-brainer?
You clearly don't know what a Catholic school principal makes. This is a lifestyle change for not only me but my family. Catholic schools don't pay the same, right? We're in the mission for we're here for the mission. My teachers are here for the mission.
Yeah.
And coming from public schools where the salaries are substantially higher, it was a different lifestyle here. So it was a difficult decision. On top of that, Leo wasn't in a very strong position when we got here, when I came in along with my staff. So it was questionable to take over an institution that you didn't see a very bright future. There's always been a future of Leo High School, and we've overcome the odds throughout the years, but it was very difficult for me to see a bright future. And to be honest with you, my star was rising in Chicago Public Schools.
Yeah. So you told the quick version of your years before Leo as a high school student, but tell me, did you feel as a kid in Chicago a sense of belonging, a sense that Chicago was invested in you and your future, or not so much?
On the south side of Chicago, you feel a part of a community, right? And when I was in Woodlawn, I felt a part of the community. Being a member of Leo High School, I felt a part of community. Going to Aurora University, I felt a part of community. The eye opener is when you come back home and you're an adult now, right? You're no longer cared for by society or the institutions of society. You're responsible for finding your way. So then you go into a few job interviews knowing that you're more than qualified, knowing that you have the skill set and you don't get it. So then you feel like you're not a part of a community. You find contentious spaces in grocery stores or restaurants or clothing stores. And you feel like you're not a part of the community. So I think that, and what we try to do here is to create a sense of community within ourselves and to give you the confidence to be outside in the real world and not necessarily need to be a part of that community. So you have to kind of reconceptualize the way you engage with communities.
Interesting. So just to give people in the audience a little background on how you and I first became acquainted, we met through our mutual friend, Danny Stipe.
Absolutely.
And she told me over coffee one day about the Leo cleanup beautification day, right? That she was helping her friend Shaka plan. And I wrote about that in my Chicago Tribune column, and that would have been 2016.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Correct.
And then I just sort of kept coming back and telling Leo stories, right? I always wanted my column to be a place where people could find hope, but not false hope. Not like rose-colored glasses hope, but hope that's honest, because it's rooted in the stories of people who are investing in each other and investing in their communities and pushing back against the status quo when the status quo isn't working. And I saw all of that in Leo and what you were doing there from the beginning. And I still do. So that was sort of how, this coffee conversation, one column turned into, really more of a friendship and kind of a checking in, the Tribune checking in on Leo through my column mostly over the years, right?
Yeah. Between you and Jim Williams, we've gotten great publicity since 2016. But before that, and I think it's important to realize how dark the days were here at school. Dan McGrath, President McGrath of Leo High School, Dan McGrath, longtime newsman, often says that we were going through the couch cushions in order to make payroll. So the product that you see today is the product of his efforts, the efforts of Mike Holmes, the efforts of the Big Shoulders Fund, the efforts of our Alumni Association. There are many hands that put in a tremendous amount of work to create this iteration of Leo, this new kind of frontier of where we're headed. And our mission is still the same. I told the Alumni Association at our annual banquet that although we look different, our mission is still the same. Yeah. And that's to clothe the naked, that's to feed the hungry, that's to give shelter to the homeless, right? Our mission is to serve. And so I'm teaching hopefully the 210 boys that are in this building that same understanding, and that our mission is to serve others, right? And even though we don't have much, it's more important that we help those who have less than us.
Yeah. So a lot of our conversations end up finding their way eventually back to violence in Chicago. And I'm curious how you feel about that fact that we talk about violence as much as we do, just really candidly, because, it's obviously an enormous problem in Chicago, in America, actually. But you're a high school principal, right? You're an educator. I come to your school, I come to your community events, I watch your TikToks. I see you trying to sell, more Christmas wreaths than your students. And I see you cheering your students on in Math Bowl and STEM night, and your students are awesome. They're like incredibly talented and driven and like literal choir boys, some of them, right? Literally. And I wonder if you ever wonder why you're expected to be offering solutions to gun violence. Like, why don't you just get to be an educator and talk about like pedagogy and college readiness and Math Bowl?
Right. So after I'll just say this preemptively, like after my undergraduate and I was working, I went to UIC to get a master's degree to understand cognitively, like how do we talk about education, right? How to be in those philosophical discussions, right? And so now I'm finishing my PhD. I'm like on the final run home, and I got to give a shout out to Dr. Dave Stovall and Dr. Steve Tozer, who are literally like pulling me to the finish line, right? But a lot of things that they taught me is the understanding of the word praxis, right? How do we take what we understand and what we know and put it into action, right? And how does that, what is the rubber hitting the road, right? And so I can't deny the fact that inside this building are 210 Black and brown boys on the south side of Chicago. That's Chicago's most dangerous, endangered population, right? And so there's a sense of responsibility knowing that to whatever degree I shepherd these boys. I think half the time they're shepherding me, but I shepherd these boys. So my responsibility is to think about not only what we do inside this institution, but what they do outside, right? So when the George Floyd uprising happened, I wanted to make sure that they weren't involved in any of that, right? I wanted to make sure that when there's a social movement that's involved, that they, whatever side they want to stand on, that they're involved in it, to be politically active, to be socially conscious.
So I hear people often talk about Chicago shootings and even death in Chicago more like a jeer, like a taunt, right? More often than I hear it discussed as like this, urgent crisis that deserves an all hands on deck solution.
It's just such a critical issue, the issue of violence. And it's no longer contained in certain communities in Chicago.
Right.
And it's no longer contained among any one generation in Chicago. It's almost like a cancer. It grows and it spreads. And I listen to WGN radio usually, and a woman texted in on John Williams a day or two ago that she and her husband had tickets for that pre-Broadway opening tonight. And they are not going because they're afraid to come in the city. I'd never heard that in my life until we center everything around March 16th, 2020, when COVID shut down pretty much a country, and we're paying for that positively and negatively. And I really need some real wisdom on that. You're a writer, I'm a preacher. And we're both trying to get messages out using the English language in two different forms. Yeah. And I too try to preach hope without being sentimental.
Yeah.
And I also try to preach challenge because I think we're all players, not victims.
Definitely see that, and I'm eager to talk to Shaka more about it. I'm eager to hear what you think about this too, though. To me, violence is such an American problem. I mean, it's a problem in Chicago, but it's kind of tragically the common thread that all Americans can relate to. I mean, every parent, I would say, can relate to the fear of dropping their child off at school and wondering if they'll be shot dead at school. School shootings happen with that regularity. Every American knows that they could get mowed down in the grocery store or the movie theater or an outdoor concert, or right. I mean, all the places that mass shootings have happened. It's we talk about it a lot as an urban problem and as a disinvested community problem, but can we solve it without acknowledging what an American problem it is?
Well, I think we have to address it that way. It's not a universal problem. I mean, and part of the American problem is the issue, which divides so many people, and that is guns. I mean, that we're not talking about violence with fistfights.
Right.
We're talking about violence, with everybody, not everybody, but a number of people packing a heater and not afraid to use it. But I've been looking for an insight in a column, Heidi, from somebody that would also relate a lot of this urban violence, particularly in Chicago, that's where we live, to the access to wearing a mask. That when I grew up, cops and robbers, the robbers all had masks. And the perpetrators of this ongoing violence, everybody's got a mask. I think it's given license to people to try things they wouldn't normally have tried. Maybe I'm on the edge of the tree on that one, but
yeah, I'd be curious how the data would bear out, because I mean the clearance rate for homicides in Chicago wasn't like huge when people weren't wearing masks. So I don't know if, your identity being partially hidden is a huge driver of gun violence, but I'd be curious about the data and that. So I was starting to say that I often hear, and I know you do too, Chicago shootings, Chicago violence, Chicago deaths, used as like a taunt, like a jeer, right? Like it's this embarrassing problem of ours, our problem to fix. More than I hear it discussed as like an all hands on deck crisis. And a lot of Chicago violence, in my experience, writing about the city for a couple decades, is othered, right? We've talked about this as if like it isn't as tragic or it isn't, an assault on humanity. It isn't as deserving of like widespread calls for answers and reform. And I'm wondering how you feel about that. Does that ring true to you?
Absolutely. So when we talk about homicides, murders, violence in the cities, they're always contextualized as urban violence, gang violence, right? So it's objectified. So what that does is give us as a society this distance between what happened and who we are, right? It creates this unnatural distance. And so, I talked about this as othering. That happens to them over there, right? And so the last time I said that in a public space, like the internet was just all upset because I used those words. But the idea of violence not being a Shaka problem or a Heidi problem, right? Or a father problem. The idea of violence in the city as being violence in the city and not violence in our society. I talked a little bit about this with you, is that everything that we see in our society is a product of something that we've done, right? And we can't treat it as if it's some plague. It's not. Even coronavirus, right? COVID-19 was the product of the creation of, right? We did that, right? We created a pandemic, and we should not other violence as if it's not something that we created, right? And so I want to bring up just this idea of, we always talk about third grade reading scores and how they're a predictor of success in high schools and prisons are built on third. We always talk about that, right? What we seldom talk about is early childhood literacy initiatives, right? 30 million words, right? So I think that the idea of us, instead of looking at the product of low third grade reading scores, to focus on early childhood literacy, right? Poor access to daycare centers in urban communities, which subsequently produce low third grade reading scores, which essentially produce high school dropouts, right? And so we always talk about things in terms of this prescriptive nature, right? How do we fix what's ailing us, but not what do we do to create what's ailing us? And that's the responsibility that we need to take, right? So we always objectivize. So if we look at institutions in our system, in our communities, we say, why are gangs so attractive? Well, why are schools less attractive than gangs, right? And so we don't ask the simplest of questions, right? So I think that us turning the way we look at things back inward, right? What did we do in order to create? We have a saying here, and we got this from the University of Notre Dame. We always say that kids do blank because adults do blank, right? So kids' behavior is a direct result of adult behavior, right? So we say that a lot. So there are things that are not happening in my school, with my staff, in the community. It's because there's something that we didn't do. And that's the problem with the conversation, right? And so I talked a lot about interrogating the questions. The question is what do we do to create this society, not why does he act like that?
Yeah. I think that question takes longer to answer though, right? Because you got to look at the history of Chicago, you got to look at the history of the United States, you got to look at so many contributing factors rather than like, can we just enact some legislation, or can we just, make the, crackdown on, reform the criminal justice system, or, something that's sort of like find the one problem and then fix it. It's like that requires acknowledging that there's 36 problems and they're decades in the making, which isn't to say we shouldn't fix it. It's just more complicated.
We can't run from complication, right? We can't run from complicated things, right? A bigger problem is what do you do with 25 empty 400,000 square foot buildings on the south side of Chicago to prevent blight, right? That are empty, right? The bigger problem is, why are families choosing to leave the city? There's if you don't attack those small things, this is something my students are probably shaking their heads right now. It's the little things. It's the daily. If you don't attack those small things and understand that they come together to create these huge problems that are sometimes massive, then we're still going to have there's still an issue, whether or not it's hard and it's difficult and it takes a long time, and sometimes somebody's going to get hurt. We're still going to have the problem. We have a society right now that systematically, right, through test scores, through suspensions, to over-discipline rates, are kicking out Black and brown students in the city of Chicago, right? So that creates a ripple effect in society. Those students still mean something, right? And so I think that we're looking at it from the wrong. We're looking at it as, this is the problem with them over there and how can I fix it, as opposed to partnering with those organizations. There are organizations that are doing great work in our communities, right? GAGDC, the Big Shoulder Fund, and they use local community activists and people that are doing grassroots work, and they support those movements, right? Those are the people on the ground. And again, I often say that instead of us thinking about like, what can we do to fix this? the answer should be, what can we do with them to address this, right? With, not
Mhm.
to.
Right.
So there's been a lot of conversations about them and doing something too. And I love my local politicians. They've been great to us, but I wouldn't say that they actually had the answers, right? They might be able to ask some good questions and some great audiences, but I wouldn't necessarily say they have the answers. The answers are with the 230 boys that are on this phone call. They know what detracts them from going to school, or what's the lure from going to games. And I think that that's where the question should lie.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. How how important is it to change the narrative so that people who can help give your students a platform and get them in the room where, you know, solution-oriented folks are positioned? How important is changing the narrative, which I know you do a lot of, in keeping people invested and caring what happens in all of Chicago's communities, not just downtown, or not just Streeterville, not just River North?
So one is changing the paradigm from it being a problem that exists in a community that's not yours to it being a social problem, right? If you change that, the whole understanding is that this is a societal problem. This is a societal ill. And then the second thing is, I'll just tell you a very quick story. I was on the phone with Josh Hale. He's the CEO of Big Shoulders on the day of the George Floyd uprising, right? And we kept just kind of, lamenting and just trying to feel like, what can we do? What can we do? And the next morning after I got up, after a long conversation with Josh, that we're the answer. It's what can I do? What can Shaka do the next day in order to help heal my community? What can Josh Hale do? What can Heidi do? Every single day we walk into this building. I told the boys this at our all school assembly. It's time for a community service project. You owe me something. We got to do something. We have to do something. So if you teach students to have that mindset, then adults should have that mindset. The answer is simply, what are you doing to help? Right? Are you involved in any civic organizations? Have you mentored a student who might be on the fringes of getting kicked out of schools? Have you donated to your local ministry, your local non-for-profit, right? In order to support, literacy efforts, right? There are hundreds of things that you can do in large and small ways. The question is what are you doing to thwart gang violence, to thwart the rise of crime in the city of Chicago? If we all ask ourselves those questions and with a clear lens and be okay with saying nothing, and I need to start, or maybe I should call Heidi. She writes columns about this stuff all the time. I'm sure you know someone that's doing something somewhere, right? So I think that we have the resources out there, and people just need to pour into those resources.
Yeah. Okay, we're halfway through, and I feel like we should maybe get to the questions. What do you think?
Let's go.
Okay, so first of all, a woman named Susie Sullivan just said, "Mr. Rawls, just a note of thanks for all you and others are doing to continue the Leo tradition. You're making a difference." So
I said, help. Susie, help. We need you. Thank you so much. We can make a difference together, Susie, right? And that's whether you're attending one of our community cleanup days or reaching out to an organization. So my only ask is, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm saying that on behalf of the boys at Leo High School and my faculty and staff as well. But on top of that, like we need help. We need help. We don't have a lot here at Leo High School, and we're blessed for everything that we have. But more importantly is that the people that are on this call have the power, political clout, financial means to assist the efforts that we're doing. So we can do so much more if many hands make light work, right? So we're doing this with bubble gum and duct tape. Can you imagine if we had some resources, right? We visited a new cheer school a couple of weeks ago, and I just thought about the potential impact that I can make with a community that had tons of money, right? That'd be great. So I thank you so much, but we need more help. We do. I need you all.
Shaka and Heidi, can I ask a question? Shaka, surrounding you 3 floors up and around are 210 young men who in many ways are the resources from which all of us can learn about the community and this question of violence. So many of their peers are not in school. When you look at when they will mention the ages of people involved in some of the criminal and particularly murderous activity, so many are under the age of 20. do you ever poll the guys here, the gentlemen, and say, what do you think of this? How do you handle it? Are you afraid of it? What's it like going home at night? Um, you know, I just don't know, because the thing that scares me is that the toothpaste never goes back in the tube. I don't think we're ever going to get to a place where, if you want to call it, the lack of violence is ever going to return. We just have to learn to manage so that it doesn't get even more out of hand than it is now. Do these gentlemen give you any insights into their own lives and the lives of their peers, particularly their moms? Do they worry when the kids go to school? How would they try to slow this cancer down?
So I mean, I don't let the blazer fool you. Like, I'm from around here, so we come in and out of this community together. So we're all living in the same community, and I think that that's the solace that the parents have. They know that I'm from around. I always tell the students, I'm from around here, right? I live around in this community. I deal with the same issues that you all deal with. That there are times where I'm nervous if I get pulled over by the police. I'm nervous at walking to my car late at night, right? And so we talk quite frequently. And this is a conversation that Heidi and I had last week, is that there are times when I have conversations with my young men where they are indeed the teacher and I'm the student, right? And I'm not afraid of dismantling that paradigm. So we're in this together. There's an inherent hierarchy. I mean, they know that we're in charge, but at the end of the day, their knowledge is that I can give them what I know, but what they take and do with that knowledge is further than what I can even imagine at times. So our conversations are quite frequent about what we could do to move in and out of our spaces, or how do we want to build a safe environment for our community. And quite often it's them that can create those spaces, right? They have friends that are on the fringe of being kicked out of school or involved in gangs. And those conversations, even if it has just parts of what I've mentioned with them in it, if they can have those conversations with their friends, then that's one student teaching another student of how to come back to school, how to be involved in what a good school is doing. The other thing is also teaching students, and I think that this is something that we haven't done, teaching students that they have a voice in this whole process. We have really, I mean, there have been some forums, and the bishop did a great thing with some of the Catholic schools and to talk about violence, but I think that giving them a voice in this process, and an active voice in this process, unapologetically, say what you need to say in front of who you need to say it, discuss your truth, because it exists whether or not we're aware of it or not, right? And so we have to understand that our students they're human beings. They come into this building with problems just like we do. They come into this building, and even in our community, they have problems, and they have gangs they need to sidestep in order to get here. We understand that our parents are constantly concerned about it, but we've created a nice bubble because of our work in the community. But that's often a case of all of us that work in this building, that work in the city of Chicago. I mean, there's not a safe space, right, in the city of Chicago. But our goal is to bring as many people into the mission that we're doing, the mission of the work that we're doing, in order for us to move forward. I hope that answered your question, Father.
Next question, how to stop the influx of guns into Chicago, and what, if anything, can be done to cut down on the supply of readily available guns that's such a contributor to street violence? Great question. I know GPAC, the Gun Violence Prevention Political Action Committee, is doing a lot of work to bring gun violence prevention advocates and gun owners together to push for gun violence prevention legislation. I think GPAC is a good organization to check out. Moms Demand has Illinois and Chicago chapters. Tamar Manassa does phenomenal work with MASK, right? Mothers Against Senseless Killings. I feel like Arnie Duncan's Chicago Cred organization's doing really great work. I mean, I feel like, educate yourself on some of the organizations that are invested in this labor, and then sign up and volunteer, right? Or write a check, or both.
Absolutely. And I think maybe creating a repository, and we've been talking about this, Heidi, for the last year, is creating a repository to say, hey, I want to help, right? And we just a simple website, even if you want to do it on, the HeidiStevens.com site, and just create, hey, I want to help. And here's 15 resources for you to getting involved in the work we do. We'll facilitate people getting engaged, because often what you have is a desire, and sometimes maybe not the means, or not the know-how how to access the means. And that's probably what you and I'm here for.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, next question, and this one is for Heidi for some reason. For Heidi, how is systemic racism enabling violence and crime in Chicago? I mean, I think it's disingenuous to have a conversation about violence and crime in Chicago without having a conversation about redlining and restrictive housing covenants and disinvestment in communities, all of which are part of Chicago's pretty recent history. I think it's important to note that, you know, the neighborhoods most impacted by violence are also where CPS closed most of those 50 schools in 2013 and where mental health resources are super scarce. So, you know, those are problems, like I said earlier, that are decades in the making, right? And you don't solve those overnight. But I think it's important that we talk about the whole picture when we discuss solutions, right? Otherwise you get the tone deaf, you know, off the mark comment like we saw from the McDonald's CEO blaming parents for their own children's deaths, as though they created the system that shut them out, you know, from any shot at the American dream. Like, you know, the problem is that they don't want it bad enough, rather than that they were systematically walled off from achieving it, you know, for most of the city's, certainly this country's history. So that's how I would answer that question. I don't know if you, how you would answer it.
No, I think you're spot on, right? I think that there are some things that are, there are institutional structures that segregate and subsequently isolate people to spaces in which they don't feel like they are part of society. The fact that a young 16 or 17-year-old boy doesn't value life is the product of what the life they've had, right? And we've contributed to that, whether it's lack of social services, increased drugs in the communities, recidivism or incarceration rates among Black and brown males, right? So there are tons of structures that could produce an angry teenage boy who doesn't feel like school is the way to go. That's an easy path, very easy.
Yeah. Why isn't the city building homes on vacant lots in West Englewood and back of the yards? I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like Bridget Gaynor, who a lot of people on this call know, she's a good Catholic, would love to talk about that. She's, you know, heads up the Cook County Land Bank Authority. So she's a great person to talk about that if anyone wants to follow up with her. But do you have thoughts on that? I mean,
no, but
it's a great idea. Certainly,
it is, but I don't know if that would be a solution, right? So it's having a home is one thing, right? But creating the infrastructure in which you could support that home is probably another, right? And we've had this conversation here in Auburn-Gresham, is just putting more people on vacant land doesn't necessarily increase the quality of life of the current residents or the residents that you're moving in, right? So I think that we have to be very deliberate with our construction of housing and questions of density and resources, right? So can this community support 20 more homes or 20 more people or 20 more families, right? So I think that
there a grocery store,
stores, the infrastructure has to exist, exactly.
Yeah, good point. How can we get leaders of minority communities to set the example of collaboration? I mean, I would say they are. I mean, you obviously are a prime example. I would say, look at Felicia Davis, CEO of Chicago Foundation for Women. Look at Sharita Ellens, the CEO of Women Employed. Dory McWhorter, the CEO of YMCA. Jamal Cole, My Block, My Hood, My City. I mean, I feel like they are.
So maybe no, they are. You know, you named. I mean, you named the Home Squad, right? That's like the Avengers of community change, right? So, but the problem is that people like us don't get the same shine as someone who shoots up a party, right? Or you know what I mean? So the media finds it a much sexier story if there's you know a shooting at a gas station, right? A mass shooting at a gas station. So I just think that the work that we're doing doesn't get the same media attention, obviously present company excluded, than most other stories.
Yeah, so it's not that the examples aren't out there, it's that the examples aren't getting covered.
Illuminated, exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What is one thing I can do to bring people together in the city to reduce the violence. I mean, I would say invest in a young person, like be a mentor, volunteer to school, believe in them and make sure they know that you believe in them, light up, you know, when you see them. Make sure that you do what you can to make the future feel to this young person bright and full of promise instead of like scary and maybe not even worth sticking around for.
I like that. Have a mentor, be a mentor, right? So the idea of there was someone that assisted you in getting to where you are, and if not, then you're that person for someone else, right? So the importance of pouring into young people and creating. We can. I talk a lot about, and when we came back to school this year, it was tough, right? Post COVID, and everyone, it's a difficult year. It's been trying. Create the narrative like this was exciting. We found out a way to educate 400,000 kids in Chicago without being in front of them. That's exciting to me as an educator, right? Because we thought that education only existed one way. So look at these setbacks and this opportunity as an opportunity. Here's a great opportunity for you to engage with young folks, right? Whether that's through your local religious organization, whether that's calling up a school like Leo or St. Francis de Sales, or calling up the Big Shoulders Fund and say, hey, I want to mentor a kid, or I want to support a student's matriculation to college, or let me buy books for the first year of college for a student, right? That's your. I think sometimes we think that our efforts have to be grand, right? We have to have this super thing. I have to support a 4-year college education. No, buy somebody's books. You know what? You can just buy me lunch one Friday. I'll tell you all the answers you need to know. But no, the idea is that something small could have a huge impact on someone's life, someone's trajectory, right? And whether that's having them visit your job or writing a column on them.
Totally. For all the other columnists in attendance today.
All three of you.
Right. Okay. Switching over to the Q&A real quick, because I'm realizing that we're leaving those folks out and it's already 12:46.
Let's go.
Okay. What could churches do to work more constructively on public policy changes? Right now, I think we are too focused on individual service and mission, not changing policing or reforming criminal justice systems. Good question. What do you think?
That's a great question. Just not for me, right? I mean, the trajectory of churches in their communities, it's so nuanced, right? Obviously, being a very proud Catholic, I'm a member of the Archdiocese. The Archdiocese is very big, right? And there's kind of the tale of two archdioceses at times, right? There are the haves and the have-nots. There's small schools like Leo High School, and there's other large schools that have surpluses and funds. So it's kind of hard for me to see.
Like what? Like DePaul College Prep, St. Ignatius, for someone who doesn't know that world.
Absolutely. I mean, St. Ignatius, obviously, right? Nazareth, right? Loyola. Those are schools that have, nice. Obviously, I mean, they're well-resourced schools because of people invest in them, and the parents pay for it as well. But that's one Catholic mission, and not to. It's doing well, and we're proud to be a part of the Catholic League along with those schools. But they're also small, struggling schools that needs the help of the Big Shoulders Fund, or rely predominantly, like Leo High School, on our alumni to keep us open. So the mission of churches is such a broad mission, and my focus is mostly on pretty much youth in their activism. So I don't really have the right answer, but I do know that the question is much more complicated than what can churches do in general.
Yeah, okay. That's a good segue into this question. Do Catholic high schools in the Chicago area collaborate, form partnerships to share resources and fellowship?
I do. That is one of my goals. When I joined the Catholic League has always been collaborative, especially around athletic events, and there are people at different schools that have partnered with other schools. I make it a point to make sure that I'm reaching out to Catholic school principals, particularly principals that have embraced the work that we do. Is the principal at De La Salle, the principal at St. Lawrence, obviously the principal at St. Francis de Sales, Our Lady of Tepeyac, Josephina. Those principals have rallied around, and we've created a small cohort. And there's different perspectives every time we talk, but the idea is that we move forward together, right? Mm-hmm. That divisive idea of we're competing against each other, right? And is gone, and we look for everything moving forward together. Now, again, there'll be times where we'll compete in basketball or football, and the competitive nature seems to subside a bit, and we go back to, the collaborative nature seems to subside, and we go back to our competitive selves. But for the most part, I am very deliberate about working with other schools.
Heidi and Shaka, when I was first ordained in 1970, we had what they called a twinning program, where a parish more on the have side would have a sister parish or a twin parish on the have-not side. And when I was driving out today from downtown, I passed our twinning parish at one time, St. Martin's at 59th and the Dan Ryan. It was a magnificent building, an old German neighborhood, and it brought back an enormous number of memories. Is there any such thing like that exists between high schools? For example, would Marist on the south side here have a twinning high school? Lawrence or Brother Rice? I see the Catholic League, and maybe I'm just misinformed and out of touch. The Catholic League is more of an athletic thing. And I just wonder do their students ever get together and talk? Because it seems to me that social change is going to come from the ground up, and that is getting these young people in their teenage years to be more open, more conversational with people different than them.
Frequently, no, right? Not as often as we should. But the Cardinal did convene a small committee of students from a variety of different high schools in which our students were able to engage in conversations and talk about some of the experiences that they were having at their respective institutions. So there has been an opportunity. Now, is that standardized or has it been leveraged as much as it could be? I would say absolutely not, right? And so like if young people now don't have conversations of inclusion and diversity and things like that at a young age, it's very difficult to engage those conversations when they get older. So we've been actively trying to reach out to schools, and there have been some schools that have been extremely receptive to the work that we're doing, and there are other schools who have other priorities at this time, which doesn't mean that they're not receptive, but they just have other priorities. So we'll work with anyone. Leo does, and again, I'll shout out St. Francis de Sales, because that's we partner together in this work, in this mission. Our Lady of Tepeyac, Josephine as well. We partner in this work quite frequently because we're the smaller schools of the Catholic League, and we want to make sure that we engage with other students, even though they don't look like ours.
Good. Okay, here's a question in the Q&A. A recent article in The Atlantic by David Frum urges the American public to give up their guns voluntarily. Much as we educated children not to smoke, we should educate children, urge families not to own or carry guns. Your thoughts? So
the idea of giving up guns is, I mean, that's a great, First Amendment question. That debate exists. The idea of an abortion, of same-sex marriages, all those problems exist in society. Unfortunately, our focus is on what we can control, right, and what narrative we can pursue. So we don't focus so much on gun control. That's not our battle. Right, there's other battles, right? Equity in education, the digital divide, access to post-secondary education. The list goes on, right? Because we're attacking one problem here at Leo High School does not negate or exclude any other problems that exist in society. Our just one focus right now is to make sure that we're attacking what we have in our grasp, what we have in what our mission is, and that's to make sure that the young men of Leo High School, Black and brown, are safe on the south side of Chicago, and that we, again, are creating a community in which they can have safety in their communities, and we're helping those in our communities, whether it's the elderly or the youth or the hungry or the poor. That's our mission.
Yeah, and that's something you can control and a bite size that's actually, manageable, right? Rather than, I mean, it sounds appealing to start a drive to get people to give up their guns, but it's tough to imagine, especially in this moment, Americans agreeing on whether we should even be wearing masks inside grocery stores, let alone something as,
sacred as a firearm,
fundamental,
right?
And written into the Constitution as the right to bear arms, right?
And at the end of the day, that there's so many things that you want to engage in. There's so many tangential problems. We could also talk about, right, sexism in society and having a school full of boys, how that's first and foremost in our conversations, and that should be one of our charges. But I drive myself crazy just doing the simple work that I'm doing, right? Just trying to save the kids that I have and usher them into life, into the next phase of life. I just have to have some parameters in which, like, this mission isn't for me. And I do believe that God put me here for a particular mission, and this is probably it. Or if they open a school in Hawaii, a Leo High School, then that's, I'm sure that's it. That's the mission. I'm like, God wants me there. So
if there's a newspaper there that needs a columnist, you'll let me know.
I got you.
Cool. All right. Okay, well, hang on, we're getting a note. 5 more minutes. Okay, one more question, and then I want to ask the question that somebody sent ahead of time because I like it as a final thought. But Michelle wants to know, I love this, how can you bring people together to create a coalition with small actions people can take immediately? It only takes small gestures of positivity and connection, but if this is presented in a collaborative platform, it will grow. I know By the Hand Club for Kids in Austin was doing that for a while. They were having those listening circles. I don't know if they still do that or if you work with them at all, but I thought that was so cool. I mean, just the idea of a listening circle, right? Like, tell me what it's like to walk around in your shoes, and then, you know, listen while I tell you what it's like to walk around in mine, and just humanize each other. Not that you should need, you know, someone to humanize themselves for you, but sadly, that's kind of how we are.
Absolutely. And there's also, we have a great opportunity. The holidays are upon us, right? So this is the opportunity. This is the time where people want to do their obligatory Christmas turkey giveaway or Thanksgiving turkey giveaway, right? And those are opportunities to engage people and say, hey, we're doing another one now in February, right? We're doing something else in February, like creating a system within the systems that already exist. I often say that when we do things here at Leo, I'm like, let's just do it when we're doing something else. Let's do it together. Let's make it big.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is this, the holidays are upon us. As you're planning your church, your churches are planning, your community centers are planning turkey. Every politician up for election next year is planning a turkey giveaway, right? That should be the impetus for us creating space for people to talk, or at least collaborating, or getting email addresses to create a Zoom link to have a community forum, or your town halls, or your automatic wards have spaces that exist. So the places exist already. It's just bringing them together and using them to work collectively and not so much separately.
Yeah. So one of the organizers is saying, I can send out a list of resources and organizations for those wanting to get involved. So just so people, if you're not looking at the chat, so you see that list should be coming. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. And then I did want to close at least our portion of this with a question that someone sent ahead of time. What do you currently see as signs for hope?
What do I currently see? I have 221 young men in this, 210 young men in this building. It's 221 people on the call. 210 young men in this building that are proud to say good morning to me every morning. They are more than happy to join me in making my TikToks or my crazy Instagram posts, right? They are normal kids on the south side of Chicago. So my thing, I see hope in their eyes every single day. I see in their eyes, I see the desire for me to make the right decisions. I see the desire for me to go out and recruit more people to come into the school, to solicit more donations so we can have a larger institution, to work with other schools, and to collaborate collectively with other schools in the Catholic League, to reach out to my friends in high places in order to give them access to visit places in Chicago, to reach out again to the Big Shoulders Fund in order to give them more exposure and more opportunities. So the students that I see in my building every day, and not just the kids that we have at Leo High School, and I don't want to centralize this, they're kids that I see outside the building every single day that give me hope as well. They're going to school, right? You see the attendance numbers for Chicago Public Schools. You see the attendance numbers for Catholic schools, right? I see St. Sabina down the street, right? I see Oglesby Elementary School, Westcott Elementary School. These are all friends, even, large high schools, Morgan Park, right? And so there are schools that are doing it right and they are doing solid work. And that's the hope. I think sometimes we focus too much on the things that are going wrong and not giving enough illumination to the things that are going right. That's where the hope is. What's going right in the city of Chicago?
I like that.
You like that, close?
Well, I want the last word.
Go for
it. No, I don't need the last word, but I would just say that what's giving me hope is the fact that we're having this conversation today, right? That you let me join in, and that 221 people showed up to listen and ask questions, and that many of us, and we all represent dozens and dozens more who couldn't be here, that we want better for ourselves and our neighbors and future generations, and those are major signs of hope for me. And also your TikToks, especially the ones where your students are on them.
I got you. There'll be more to come.
Counting on it.
Does that bring our First Friday to somewhat of a close?
Correct.
I think so.
Good.
I can't thank you enough. This is a tough conversation. I mean, let's be honest. that there's a huge divide in our country on almost every issue in the world, whether it's sports, religion, race, politics, violence. And I think sadly, sometimes we see oversimplified answers. Well, just put more security downtown, or let's put more police in Auburn-Gresham and that'll drive everybody out. Well, then they go someplace else. There are no simple answers, but I think Heidi and Shaka, we've addressed this today. And I know a lot of people are going to be restless because there are no simple answers, as I just mentioned. Life is a process. And Shaka, you've got a tremendous ability to influence the lives of 210 young African-American men at some of the most influential times in their life. It has been said that outside of the home, the most influential people have always been coaches in the athletic world. Well, I think outside of the home of Leo students, some of the most influential people are the women and men standing in front of a classroom, are those who roam through a cafeteria, are those who can fire them up in a variety of ways today. 210 is not the south side of Chicago, but darn it, it's 210 young men who have a tremendous ability to influence an awful lot of people. And Heidi, the written word is so tremendous. You are a part of the fourth estate. And the fourth estate has always had a tremendous amount of power. Yeah, you're not writing every day, but you're writing once a week. And you are a part of an organization for change. Don't stop that, but please don't stop writing either. The influence of a lobbyist with a computer at the tip of their fingers in a contemporary world, to me, is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I won't stop preaching, but I have to learn on the best way to preach from people like the two of you. I can affect the churches. Some of you can affect readers. Others can affect students. But we're all doing a small part to it in the midst of a tremendous problem. So thank you for the courage today to do this. Next month, we have another former colleague of Heidi's, Barbara Mahaney, who's going to be with us.
Barbara.
And that's going to be on December 3rd. And it's going to be live stream, of course. I shouldn't say, of course. We're trying very hard to get back to the Union League Club and get back in person. But as we poll the delegation, people are not ready yet. So we're hoping that sooner than later, we'll be able to stand shoulder to shoulder, break bread together, and at the end of moments like this, stand and give a standing ovation to two key people for sharing their time, their talent, and their wisdom today. Barbara Mahaney, our speaker next month, has written a wonderful little book on winter. And when you consider December 3rd, it's going to be dark at 4:15. And I think I hate the dark more than the cold. The dark for me brings me inside of myself an awful lot. And it puts us in a very quiet space sometimes that I'm very not comfortable with. And Barbara is going to share her wisdom on winter, on the impact that it has on the darkness that can always lead to the light. So please be with us on January 3rd. More information will come out thanks to our beloved leader, Judy Murphy, and that'll come out, I'll bet you, this afternoon. But for now, Heidi, Shaka, thank you so much for the gift, and not just for being here. Look at the talent you have. We talk about how do we do social change. One does it with written word, one does it with inspiration, occasional kick in the butt. But to be able to shape and form young men is one of the greatest things in the world. So thank you so much for your time today and for the courage to take on a topic I think a lot of people would rather run the other way. So I'm honored. Thank you. Have a blessed Thanksgiving coming up and a good holiday season.